Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 248 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob? It's Therapy Wednesday.
It's Therapy Wednesday.
It's Therapy Wednesday.
It's definitely Therapy Wednesday, and it's a new month.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm having a tough time making the serotonin come out of the old brain meats today. So
Yeah.
I can really use the company and the therapy and
I think we both need this for different reasons. Like, you definitely need the serotonin pickup, and I need a little less anxiety.
Yup.
I think that's kind of where I'm at, and it's work related. It's I would say 95% work and 5%. Hey, how's your D6 campaign release coming out?
How's a book coming there?
Exactly.
You writing the book? You got the intro chapter written for it? You got
you're
some
working really hard on?
wrote up some NPCs there, or you
Kinda.
you got a setting? You gonna get a little outline? You gonna do the session zero?
Yeah, pretty much. So, but it is coming along. Actually, it was funny. Was my therapist actually asked me about it? She's like, "So I was told by you to check in with me on this," and I went, "Oh, that's right. I did make that mistake, didn't I?"
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So she checked in on me with that, and it was good. It was good though. It was a good test for her as well. Of like, let's see how she does this to me. And honestly, she was fantastic. So that's good. When you have a good therapist who checks in with you properly versus like checks you at the door and then you're like, ooh, you know. But no, we've got a great relationship. She's wonderful. So.
One of the best therapist things I've ever heard is someone was talking, you use a lot of negative language about yourself. You should stop that. Like, oh, yeah, I know I should. Brought a Nerf gun to the next session.
Stop shooting them.
Every time they said something negative about themselves, just shot them.
I honestly love that. I honestly love that. I'm sure a couple sessions in, there would be need for extra reloads, magazines.
It didn't even make it through the session. He was just like, oh, God, sometimes I'm sometimes I need to think more about what I do.
Yeah, there you go.
Just see the gun just slowly come up and then slowly go back down.
God, there's so many movie parts to that. Like,
so
at the same time, I would think, like, that's perfect for, like, a superhero setting where you've got a therapist in a superhero setting who does the same thing with actual guns.
Oh,
yeah.
I
know you can super heal, so we're going to handle this in a delicate way.
Right. I know you're the Man of Steel and bullets only bounce off of you, but I have it on good authority they sting, so blam, blam, blam! What the hell? Was that a Desert Eagle? Yeah, I wanted to make my point. Walk it off, Cupcake.
Exactly. This ain't trauma-free, honey.
Right.
Carrot or the stick. That's all it's going to be.
You've had
Carrot
worse.
or the stick. In any case, it is February.
It is February.
And we kind of decided that February was going to be, like, you had said you wanted to make February a red month. You wanted it to be different.
I thought, since this is going to be the last time we do February, since we are sunsetting the show come, May, I think it is?
March. No. Is it May?
I think it's
May.
May.
It is May.
I think it's
May.
Yeah. That we only have a handful of shows left that we can't really alienate an audience that we're not going to have much longer anyways. So might as well talk about some of the spicier topics that we've been trying to keep family friendly.
Yeah.
And not that we're not going to be not family friendly, except for maybe the last show of the month, but. But we can get into some of our spicier, sultrier topics in the month of February.
Definitely.
Yeah, more adult in the month of February.
Crack some eggs that we definitely have tiptoed around, and discussed in private. Oftentimes when talking about other shows.
Yeah.
This topic inclusive, because when we got into talking about adult themes, which is what we're doing today, it started much longer time ago when we were talking about grittier games and realism and romance. And we kind of danced around the topic and how much we wanted to delve into it and things like that, to really decide, like, how far are we willing to go and say, this is a topic we want to examine. Mm-hmm. And I did a whole bunch of research on Nordic LARPs and, like, where this kind of mentality comes from and things like that. But at the same time, I'll flat out say that a lot has changed. In just doing the research and going back through some of the historical forums and such that went back to the early 2000s, it's significant how much the community has changed on this topic.
Yeah, it really is.
It really was kind of eye-opening. So, but let's set some groundwork.
Yeah,
sure.
Same
thing. I'm going to straight up say this, that we're not expecting this to be a trigger warning episode, but know that we're going to be talking about topics that may have triggers associated with them.
Yeah. The episode itself is not a trigger warning, but the topics we will be discussing as of the things you might include in a game are the things you would include trigger warnings
Correct.
For.
And we'll be discussing that.
Yeah.
So just to kind of get that out of the way. So why do we want to include adult themes in the first place?
Yeah,
we tend to play very light, not high verisimilitude games for that very reason, that we want to have fun.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about, like, power fantasies and stuff like that, of, like, wanting to be the big damn hero, all these, like, sort of light, pulpy heroics and stuff like that. So, like, why would you take a game like this and put stuff like grief and death and, suicide or something like that into a game? Does that kind of bring the mood down at the table,
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the key components about it, is understanding the mood of the table and the mood of the story. But at the same time, like, it's not really part of game systems. Most systems, and I will say most with a capital M, like more than 90% of the systems that are out there, don't include adult themes in their topic. They just don't. You can find them. Simple searches will find them without a doubt. In fact, our next show and System Spotlight has adult themes inclusive in it. We've done System Spotlights on it. Urban Shadows is a big one. Vampire the Masquerade indicatively has adult themes in it.
Yeah.
But for the majority, it's not really included. Like, D&D doesn't really have it. And I'm going to go back to Gnome Stew, which I thought did a wonderful quote on this. This was a blog that I found. The vast majority of games approach mature topics by ignoring them.
Yep.
Take D&D, for example. You know it's not a game where PCs are supposed to make tough choices or win fair victories or deal with painful topics like rape, because it's just not covered in the rules. About the closest D&D comes to having evil alignments, and while there are some interesting moral perspectives built into the game, the classic, quote, all orcs are evil, quote, for instance, they're not even remotely part of the game's focus. And that's the truth, is that they're not trying to charge you with a moral dilemma in D&D.
It was one of those things that, like, I was kind of found was almost a glaring omission, is that, like, as a core race, they have half-orcs, right? And then in the Monster Manual, they go on to describe how all orcs are evil. How do half-orcs get made? I mean, I think we all know, but nobody talks about it. Yep. How do you have a half-orc character that does not start with a tragic backstory?
Yeah.
And
I mean, without saying it, and I'll say it because it's there, there's clearly a tie between what they're trying to frame there.
Yeah.
With the verisimilitude of existence of, the English had a certain opinion about Africans.
Yeah.
And the idea of African-American blood mixing with white blood had a certain feeling about it, but it was never discussed.
Right.
And it's clearly painted in the same light. And this is a common theme across a lot of cultures that have countercultures that are different than them. I mean, we've seen that in mixed races in pretty much every sci-fi that's out there as well. This is a common cultural thing. The difference is that D&D doesn't address the morality, the ethics, the feeling, any part of that. They avoid it.
Yeah, because they want to focus on the light heroic fantasy.
Correct.
They want you more focused on if you're throwing fireballs at your opponent rather than what the morality of throwing fireballs at your opponent is.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
So I guess, it kind of comes back to the original question then. Okay, most games dodge it.
Mm-hmm.
They got to be doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
And these sort of heavy topics can be a real downer sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we ever include them?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that is done almost subversively, because we don't recognize that that's the reason why we're doing it, but it's the truth behind it, is that it's therapeutic.
Yeah.
It's cathartic to have deep connections with the other people at the table, be it them or their characters.
Yeah.
And by proxy, I'm just going to flat out say it, you're making a connection with those people.
Yeah.
You're having emotional ties, an experience of love, intimacy, loss, grief, and exposing things. And I'm using the word intimacy as self-disclosure.
Right, not as sex.
No, we're talking about, sex is a way of self-disclosure. It is sharing of privacy, of dreams, of beliefs, of emotions, of meaning experience. But the key to all of that, and the part that makes it truly intimate, and I think I read that it was Harry Reese and a few others who stated this, is that a relationship to be intimate is self-disclosure must occur in a context of appreciation, affection, and understanding and acceptance. An intimate experience is not taking place until there's an empathetic feedback, until acceptance and acknowledgement are communicated verbally or non-verbally as an indication that trust is justified. And that is what happens at a table when it's successful. When people sit down and have an empathetic moment with each other, and there's an understanding that it occurred.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a feeling, and either a compassion or even, regardless of a response, a justifiable response, you were creating that intimate moment.
Yeah.
And that carries waves far beyond the game.
Sure.
Far beyond even the action that occurred. And that's the key, is that it's rarely the action. It's always the reverberations that come off of it later.
It's the truly human moments.
Correct.
Yeah, those moments where, you can have all the combat and action scenes and stuff like that you want, but those are like candy. They're substanceless in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But when you have a moment where, there's a heart-to-heart where people at the table truly grieve the death of an NPC because it was tragic and unfair, and maybe tears are shed, those are those moments where no mechanic can encapsulate that. No system can force that into being.
Your betrayal that you orchestrated in our last game was like cratering from a meteor hitting at the table. It was impressive. It was emotional. It was a tie. Everybody was bound in a different way to it.
Yeah.
It wasn't the act. It was the response that put us all together. And some of us, like myself, I'm still struggling to figure out how my character will finally react to this. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm still stunned, and I tend to believe that that's what my character is handling it like.
Yeah, dead honest. Stunned, and I don't even know what to do with this is a valid reaction.
Right.
But it was a powerful enough moment at the table that it created that reaction.
Correct. You had said when we were doing the review on this that it's that having an intimate moment at table is the Dark Souls of role playing.
Yeah. We joke about that. You throw that out a lot. The Dark Souls of whatever. But it kind of is. In the sense that Dark Souls is renowned for its difficulty, right? But it's also renowned as being a very rewarding experience because of that difficulty. Yeah. It is harsh, but it is fair. And if you engage with it, and you are able to overcome it, then the feeling of victory you get from defeating a Dark Souls boss is head and shoulders above the feeling you get from defeating some easy mode throwaway boss in any other game, because of the difficulty curve of it. And so, if you can get these genuine moments of intimacy, these genuine moments of therapeutic catharsis at your table, where you share a real human moment, those are like the Dark Souls of role-playing. You will get much more satisfaction out of those moments in role-playing than you will from any nat 20 on on firing your bow at that dragon.
Yep.
You know?
I agree. I completely agree.
I agree.
I think stepping away from therapy, drama.
Straight
being
up drama.
Dramatic. You know, the conflict doesn't come from a salad.
Right. Yes.
Despite what marketing ads would like to have you believe, or memes involving a cat.
Yeah.
You know. But it's true. Like, if we're having a honest conflict, it is because of these themes most of the time. Mm-hmm. And to understand that conflict, you have to understand the drama behind it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it human. You can't... I mean, it's one thing to have a villain who literally just wrings his hand and twirls his mustache and is evil. But it's a throwaway. It doesn't feel anything.
What makes him evil? What is he doing that is evil? Within our conception of evil, you know? Actually, kind of germane to this point, Heatsink, much earlier in the live chat tonight, dropped the comment, killing feels very adult. As in adult themes, and how combat is not an adult theme necessarily. He said combat feels very adult, and I want to bring it right back around to this point, because you're absolutely right. How do you have a game about combat without in some way acknowledging that when you have combat, you kill things? You're not going to explore the impact of those deaths, of loss, of grief.
We often bring food around, and I'm going to reference food for this just to help with a situation. There is a difference between going to McDonald's for a cheeseburger because you're hungry at this moment in time. You'll not remember that cheeseburger. Mm-hmm. You'll barely think about it literally after its final bites move past your lips.
Yep. I'm already onto the fries, buddy.
But if you go for a steak, you sit down, you take the time to order it, you place that order. You place the order the way you want it. Mm-hmm. You get the sides that you want, and it comes prepared beautifully. You're going to remember it.
Yep.
Far, far better, because there's a lasting effect of how you're doing it. You're committing to eating. Exactly. Versus just, I just need food in my mouth.
Right.
A candy bar probably would suffice the same way.
Whatever, dude. A cheeseburger's a cheeseburger. But a steak, how would you like that cooked? Oh, now I'm personalizing it.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's the difference between a meal and a solution.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the key, is that combat is easy, honestly. Killing is hard.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's... the semantical difference there is huge.
Uh-huh.
And so that is drama. Drama is knowing who you're slaying and why.
Yep. And it's actually... we mentioned a number of times how my character crossed that line in your 7th Sea game. Mm-hmm. And it is precisely this line that she crossed. Because I didn't defeat him in heroic combat. I murdered a man.
Yeah.
In not really cold blood, because it was a combat. They were trying to board our ship.
Without a doubt.
But I just put the crosshairs on his head and pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
There was nothing heroic about it. He stood no chance.
No.
And that's what I did. I didn't defeat. I murdered.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You don't slay.
Yeah.
That comment. I still hear that ringing in my head from Hatter from the most recent re-rendition of Alice. Because it, I don't slay. You don't slay. Because that's the thing, is that most of us don't.
Yeah.
It's just combat. Right?
Yeah.
That's all it is.
You don't think about those things, you know?
And so when you do have stuff like this, and this kind of reaches back to our gritty, violent stories, is that violence and grit means that there are consequences.
Yeah.
That the world reacts to your actions. When you go and take out, when the farmer tells you that there are goblins up in a cave that have been coming down and stealing his goods, and, he needs, he wants it taken care of, and you go up there and come back with goblin heads, and he's disgusted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, the problem's solved, but get those the hell out of here. And then people in town look at you funny. Like, okay, we've always had goblins. They just started coming down to town. We didn't necessarily mean you should go murder them.
Right, they're a little pest. We wanted you to cull a few. We didn't want you to bring back damn trophies.
Yeah.
And celebrate it, you
know?
Like,
okay, you guys are clearly mercenaries. We're going to feed you and get you the hell out of town. Please leave before dawn. We don't want the children to wake and ask questions. You know, that's realism. That's violence being noted as violence, right? And, you know, it's understanding that things like that, when you switch a game to that mode, your players need to know. It needs to be communicated that now you have a rating system for your game.
Yeah.
Because they're going to feel the difference. They're going to feel that piece. I think in that show we talked about Invincible, the show.
Yeah.
It is a super violent show, but all of that violence isn't horror.
It's in service to the narrative because you need to see what a superpowered character is capable of in this setting. And they strip away all of the niceties of, Superman threw a man through a wall, and then he's off screen, and we never see him again, and we never learn his name, and we don't think too much about how he shattered 47 bones in that man's body, and he'll never walk again.
Right.
You know, but it's just Superman, and he defeated the bad guy. You should feel happy about this. You know, Invincible pulled those blinders off of all of our eyes and went, no, when a superhero throws a man through a wall, bricks don't yield that easy.
Yeah, and there's something to be said that it doesn't have to be that critically harsh in the way that you depict it. I mean, we also talk about Venture Brothers.
Sure.
And it's kind of done in a tongue-in-cheek way, but there's still consequences when Brock drives his car around the inside of the superhero's lair and slams into people. They're in horror.
Yeah.
All of those henchmen are terrified of what's going on. It's Samson.
They should be terrified.
You know, and when it's over, and like months later, like Brock's just like, like, I recognize you. Yeah, I was attached to the front end of your car with my buddy Chuck, by the way, who's still in traction, and I'm sorry, you went way over the line, Brock.
Yeah.
And, like, Brock feels bad about it at that point. But that's the whole thing, is that even though it's a little tongue-in-cheek, it still shows the realism, the drama of that moment, and the impact of what it did to that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I love the idea of early murdering of the villain and the henchman coming back in a vengeance because of what they did to the man that they adored. Or the woman that they adored.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's real drama. That's hitting hard. That's them looking at you saying, while they've got you, chained up, they're just like, oh, you're going to be like a typical villain? No, I'm not. You murdered my boss. In cold blood. For you could have taken him in. You could have done any number of things, but you just straight up murdered him.
Yeah.
You put hundreds of us without a home, without anything to know what to do. No, there was only one thing that we could do, and that was come and find you.
Yep.
And end this the right way.
Right.
Who's
the villain?
Yeah.
Who's the villain?
Yeah, exactly. And that's drama. That's impact. That's feeling.
Yeah.
Right? And that's scary sometimes.
It is scary sometimes.
And I dare say a lot of games, like I said, don't talk about how to introduce that, how to bring that around, how to manage it. It's not in the mechanics in most cases.
In a lot of cases. I know we have a very specific game that we're segueing into here.
Yeah.
But I wanna segue slightly off topic before we get there.
Go for it.
I'm just saying because it's not in the show sheet, and I didn't want you to be like, where are we going with this?
Anywhere you want to go.
Is Vampire the Masquerade.
100%.
Both you and I grew up playing that game a lot.
We did. Through our very formative years of, like, young adulthood.
Yeah, and it was probably the first, the first real, like, non-D&D. Well, I mean, I grew up on Palladium, so I guess that's not really true. But, like, it's not... It was the first kind of, like, this is about drama and character style game that I played, rather than this is a combat game, you know?
Yes, I will agree with that. It was the first game that had LARP involved with it.
Yeah.
And in that sense, the LARP was about talking. Nobody had buffers.
Yeah, it was posed to me as a very political game. And you know, it did say right on the cover as a game of personal horror, whether it was played that way or not. You know,
right.
It was at least posed to us this way. But I think that was kind of a lot of where it ended. We were talking earlier, and you mentioned that it wanted to be Anne Rice.
The books
of Anne Rice, where it dealt with the personal horror of being a creature of the night, and what is the morality of existing and continuing to support your own existence when you must kill and hunt to do that. You know?
How much do you look at them as sheep, or how much do you look at them as children?
Yeah.
That you have to cultivate in some level, or art pieces, or any number of things.
Right, and if you turn someone else into a vampire, are you giving them a gift or a curse?
Right, no, 100%.
A little bit of both, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what they wanted the game to be, but because of how it was written, and because of how the rules focused on things like combat, and they focused on things like the different skills that allow you to, like, shapeshift in wolf claws.
The powers of the clans.
Yeah, the powers, the super strength and the super speed and all that.
Right, how much they hated each other, you know, things like that were kind of sidelined almost to what their abilities were.
Right. And so you ended up with more, like, everybody looked at it and went, oh, this is Blade, this is Underworld.
Yeah.
And didn't say this is supposed to be Anne Rice.
Yeah.
Or I should say few people did.
Yes.
In my experience. And I really just think, again, that was a kind of a symptom of how it was written. What the rules tried to focus on.
And then what society saw at that time.
Yeah.
Vampire and their modern day vampires and what that looked like. You know, what did Bram Stoker's Dracula look like, really? Like, that was the closest that we got to questioning the morality, but then we're immediately presented with the movie versions of Anne Rice, right? Which were not about the struggles of conflict, but a lot of murder and a bit of mayhem, you know, and control. Very sexual, very powerful. You know, you had Underworld, which was, you know, all about combat and sleekness and you know, Children of the Night being this thing to adore.
Latex bodysuits and guns akimbo.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and werewolves being these other things. And then you know, as we progress down
Michael Sheen too, right?
Yeah. God, yes, Michael Sheen. Jesus. Such an amazing actor.
Oh, God.
Can't get over that one.
So good.
But that progressed even through other shows. Like, that didn't stop that from being the theme. No matter what we were presented with, it was sexy vampires doing dangerous things in a world of effectively government control.
Right.
Regardless of what you call that government. Not really thinking about who they were and what they were doing. That was a side commentary.
And then on top of all of that, too, like I said, the rules themselves, there were rules for things like humanity, you know. They had this thing called the Hierarchy of Sin, which was basically a very fancy way of saying how you are, the conflict between the beast within and the humanity you're desperately trying to hang on to.
Yes.
And when you do something bad, when you give in to the beast, and you do a vampiric thing, it should hurt your humanity. The more you become okay with the beast and stop trying to be the human you used to.
Yeah.
And if you slip far enough, you turn your character sheet in, because you're just not identifiable as anything close to human anymore. You're a feral monster.
Yeah.
That just unslakable thirst for blood, you know?
Yep.
And that was what that game was supposed to be. You know, I was discussing with you earlier, I said I would be interested to pull those rules back out and see what a game with our modern sensibilities and understanding of what personal horror should be would play like.
And I even said that I think we would roll about as few dice as we do when we're trying to do social stuff in D&D.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't be a combat game. It wouldn't be control would still be a thing. Mm-hmm. Dominance would still be a thing. But those things would come out when we were losing humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
When we had to fold into that other existence.
And you mentioned earlier, too, how the gaming community has come a long way.
Very much so.
As far as these things go. So, like, back when we played Vampire,
mm-hmm.
A lot of the prevailing opinions of including adult themes in the games was essentially, if your players don't like it, they should rub some dirt in it and walk it off.
Yeah, I literally, while going through the research for this, Vampire came up a lot. And early 2000s to even like mid to late 2000s, the prevailing commentary about how do I handle intimacy and things like that in the game, is that people were like, well, Vampire is a very rapey game. Vampires are dominant. They just take what they want and do these effectively human rapes for blood and things like that. So it's just going to happen. That's going to be a theme that's going to come up. They treat them like toys.
Right.
And it's like,
if your players don't want to talk about rape, they shouldn't play Vampire. Like,
pretty much.
I don't know that that's a one-to-one comparison, my guy,
Yeah, it's a very carnal game, and I'm like, no, it's not.
I'm not saying that it doesn't come inherently with adult themes, but the idea that you should never have a discussion about safety and that you should never take your players' safety into concern is a very old-fashioned, way of thinking about things. And I think a lot of those same people are the same people who, honestly believed that Gamergate was about ethics in game journalism,
Yeah.
But
it's not in the rules. You still
see it on Reddit.
You definitely do. You definitely do.
What should I do about this situation? Oh, well, if your players shouldn't, if they don't want that, they shouldn't be at your table. Well, no, actually, it is okay to take your players' concerns into account.
Yeah. We'll come back, circling back to that, but after that, we have had, especially with I think with the birth of Powered by the Apocalypse. And the game community, the game design community that came in follow-up of that, we saw a lot of different gamers coming out of that. We saw a shift in the Vampire community of that style of gameplay into something where the game had mechanics for it. Mm-hmm. I mean, Urban Shadows is a direct example today that literally has moves in the game called intimacy moves. And each archetype in the game has one, and it represents how you connect to moments of physical and emotional closeness. It's part and parcel to the game, whether it's vampire feeding, or sex, or psychic bonding. It doesn't matter. It is a connection. It is a way for you to empathize with someone who is moving through something that is challenging for them on a supernatural level. And that right there allows you to, through the mechanics, work through those moments. And that straight up paints a different picture about how we view things and how we can view things. Mm-hmm. Because you can't just say, well, just walk it off. No, it's in the rules. Like, there's line items for this.
Yeah.
That's what this game is about, and this game is teaching us how to play it. Urban Shadows actually did a really great job of having a mature content section that did a nice job of breaking things down.
Urban Shadows, I want to say, was my first Powered by the Apocalypse game that I really dug into. I think I'd gotten Dungeon World, but I didn't really understand how to read it.
Well, and it didn't. In all honesty, you didn't know that it was Powered by the Apocalypse at first glance.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
But Urban Shadows, we did this, we spotlighted it in episode 193 from January of 2023.
Yes.
So if you're looking for
honestly,
that episode,
not that long ago.
If you want to learn more about that, that was 1 year ago, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, it has a really good section in there. And this is the first time I actually learned about things like the X card and stuff like that.
You'd heard about it, but you had never seen it in Czech.
Really? No, I'm pretty sure Urban Shadows is the first time I read the words X card.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I started seeing it everywhere else, and I thought, oh, well, cool. Somebody else read Urban Shadows too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it originated in Urban Shadows. This is the first place I learned of it. So
yeah, yeah. No, it was prevalent, and then a few major houses that obviously made it bigger into the game scene really kind of brought it to the light. I think it was really great, and they expressed that it's important, that it is something you need to lean on, and like even as a storyteller, you need to be the first person to use those to help allow the table to feel comfortable in use of it.
Be the first follower, yeah. You were the first person to throw an X card in my game.
Yes.
In fact, I think to date the only person to throw an X card.
Yep.
And you had mentioned, and we were kind of talking about it later, that you felt you were very uncertain whether or not you should throw that X card. Because you didn't want to break the flow of the game. You didn't want to interrupt other people's fun, but you felt overwhelmed by the scene. So there was that sort of inner conflict.
Yep, exactly. And it was necessary, I think, in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the point of the X card, is to handle it. Are you uncomfortable? Yes. Then handle it.
Yeah.
There's no reason to be uncomfortable.
Right.
That's the whole point of it. Another thing they point out is avoiding defaultism. And when you at first glance, you're like, okay, I don't quite understand what you're trying to say here. But the point of it is that we default to what we see in our news and media about adult themes, whether it's, rape, bigotry, assault, things like that. We follow the standard tropes. This person assaulted that person in this way.
Yeah.
And it's contemporary, and it's very grounded in our reality. And what they're saying is that's not true for where you are at.
Yep.
Where your characters are at in this game. Don't immediately default to those things. There's nothing that says that you can't have the same type of depth within your setting that makes sense for the setting.
So instead of like a murderous homophobe or something like that, which is a very real, very personal thing.
Yeah.
Make it like a ravenous vampire that is collecting the brains of educated scientists for whatever reason.
Yeah. Still has a lot of the same feeling, but it's 1 degree away.
Yeah. And it draws people into your setting instead of taking them back out of your setting.
Exactly.
You see this a lot. Defaultism. You see this a lot in discussions, especially like kind of around D&D, where you've got a Western European medieval setting. And D&D obviously is not Western Europe.
No.
It does not take place on Earth.
No.
It does not have the same cultural influences, even remotely. And yet you still see people in certain discussions being like, oh, well, I have things like misogyny in my game because back then that's what people were like. I'm like, back then when?
Yeah.
Did misogyny originate in Candlekeep or Waterdeep? Like, back then, where?
Yeah.
What historical figures are we talking? What
I didn't realize that that monotheism existed in Neverwinter.
Right. Exactly. You hear the same thing about homophobia.
Yeah.
It's like oh well, people think it's against God. Like what? Why would they?
Yeah.
First
off, all elves pretty much look the same.
Yeah, exactly. Corlon Lathon, I think is known to change genders on a whim,
very fluidly. And I'm sorry, druids do it all the time.
Exactly.
So that and that's the thing is that don't lose sight of the context your players are in, and enhance the story by using it. Another thing is that we often lean into the action of the moment and not allude to the cruciality of it. That we have this place where it happened, the room where it happened, if you will, that often has more evidence than necessary about the instance. You don't have to explain the act when you walk in to the pub and the broken tables there and windows and blood stains.
Yep.
And the guards are literally walking people out, sometimes on stretchers and other ones who are limping and some who are still sheltered in the corner from the horror.
Yeah.
Like, that has way more impact than walking into the fight.
Which was more horrific for you guys at my table? The gibbering mouther or the person who used to be the gibbering mouther's husband coming to you at midnight and going, "She's changed"?
Neither.
Yeah?
The worst one was the baker.
The baker?
The scene.
I'm trying to remember.
Back in Strahd's, or not Strahd, when the scene was closed off and we got into the baker's house, or the baker's shop, who had been murdered by the vampire and her crew.
That one. Yeah?
And we were trying, because we had to look at the scene to figure out what happened.
Yeah. A baker had been murdered in his shop, and he had written the name of his killer in blood on the wall next to him, just entirely exsanguinated.
And we kind of knew that it wasn't what it appeared to be, but we had to look at it to figure that out.
Yeah.
And that's far worse.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't something we do every day of the week.
Especially when you guys realized that it was a cheap frame job.
Mm-hmm.
That they were trying to frame the person whose name was written in blood on the wall. And then you're like, did they beat this guy and make him write his... Like, you start thinking of the movie Seven at that point.
Yeah.
Of like, what torture did they threaten this man with to make him write this word in his own blood? You know?
So again, it's not so much the act, it's the scene after that often does it.
Yeah.
It's the fallout.
You didn't watch him suffer, but it was heavily implied from what you witnessed. Yeah.
Yeah. I read one that really hit me, and that was you had the players were advancing quietly up on a keep that they believed had been taken over by a group of thugs to hide out in. And it was rumored that they possibly had taken prisoners or something like that. And as they approached the keep, the storyteller said, I'm going to just put an X card on the table upside down, and if anybody needs it, flip it. But I'm going to present something. Mm-hmm. And they were like, okay. And they said, as you're approaching in the very dim light of the day, you see a shadowy figure shambling at you. And they're like, is it a zombie? Did they raise the dead? Oh my God, how horrific would that be? And like, as it gets closer, you can see it's someone clutching bits and pieces of clothing to their body. Her hair is matted. And he got like one sentence further, and someone reached out and flipped the card. They said, "Enough. I'm good. We're murdering everyone in that damn keep."
Yep.
Because it was they did not want to know more through description.
Yeah.
They were done.
Yeah.
They were just done.
What did they do? They hurt them.
Yeah.
That's all you need to... They hurt
them. And you're like, okay. Like, that person, we're healing them.
Yep.
As best as we can, because we can't heal the mental scars. And then we're going to kill everybody in that keep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okie dokie.
Yep.
And it was palpable, he said at the table, of how much they wanted to make sure that place paid.
Mm-hmm.
And after it was all said and done, like, one person came to them and said, did they all do it, or was it just a select few there? Did you decide that? And the group was like, that's just something we're going to have to live with.
I'm going to sleep at night by telling myself they were all complicit.
Yeah, but don't worry, they were all bad. Like, that whole concept,
Yep.
And so I think that leads to the other point that they put in the mature content, which was emphasizing the consequences.
Emphasize the consequences, yep.
There's nothing, like we said it about the goblins, but like that's a harsh example, but like even just a previous act that your group might have done.
Like torturing a bandit that was press-ganged against his will into banditry.
Shut up.
Breaking his fingers and demanding answers of him.
Yeah.
And then setting him free only to run into him months later.
Yeah. Yeah. And being called a killer through the whole thing.
Yeah. Like that?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Just like that.
Okay.
Emphasizing the consequences.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah, we can move on now at any time. It's a little PTSD there.
Yeah, and then the last one, obviously, solicit feedback early and often.
Yeah, don't wait till you do this kind of stuff to ask for feedback. Start early. Let your players be comfortable with giving you feedback about the game so that when those heavier moments hit, they feel comfortable with stating themselves.
Yeah.
And stating how they feel about it. And help them be okay with stating, because some people at the table may be like, oh, this was awesome, and somebody else at the table would be like, I didn't really enjoy myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be great that they said that. Okay, well, tell me about it more.
Yeah.
I think it's great you really enjoyed yourself, but I need to hear this.
Super important that you validate that kind of feedback. When you flipped the X card, when we talked about it later, the thing that you told me was the reason you felt okay about the situation flipping the X card was because the moment you did it, I went, okay, valid. Talk to me about what you're feeling right now. Yep. What is it about the experience we are X-carding?
Mm-hmm.
How can I make the experience palatable to you? I never said, oh, come on, Rob, really?
Yeah, no, wasn't part of that at all.
I never rebuked you.
Yeah, and that is the key to the X card, is immediate acceptance.
Yes.
And it's hard. That is not easy for us to do in a moment.
I actually want to dip down into our questions because we have a question about this very topic.
I think that's great.
And I feel like we should throw it in right now. It's from Nevim. Nevim asks, should a GM warn about triggers in the scenario before the game and maybe spoiling some of the scenario by doing so? Or do you keep it hidden, but on the other hand have some emotional security mechanism like the X card? Or something else, a secret third thing?
The first thing I'm going to say is expose. There's no reason to hide. The situation will unfold.
Yeah.
It's never going to be like, oh, I missed the surprise. No. It's going to hit differently than you think it will.
Yeah.
Because they don't know everything that's in your head as a storyteller. They have no idea.
I feel also like our culture has heavily shifted towards spoilers being the ultimate sin you can commit with a story. And really that's really not the thing, I warn my players very openly and very vocally about themes that I'm going to include. I had a whole discussion with you guys about when the bandits were becoming involved. I said, is it okay if children are involved here? I'm not planning on killing any of the children. It's never going to be a scene where they bring out an 8-year-old and then they just murder him it's never going to be like that,
Mm-hmm.
But if children are possible combatants that you may have to make some choices about, is that a thing that is acceptable for you guys?
Yeah.
And everybody went, ooh, that's harsh. But yeah,
I think we're going to be okay.
It would be deep. We'll keep our finger on the pulse there, but I think we're okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure. Okay, a couple of the bandits had like a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old holding crossbows and shoved them out into the battlefield and went, get going.
Yeah, this is your initiation, much like a gang.
One of the players saw that, decided it was unacceptable, not in an X card sort of way, but in a roll for initiative. Yeah. I hit him in the head with an arrow way.
Yep.
And it was great. It was a great, very powerful scene. But I that's never something I would just spring on you guys,
Right. And even like the previous one that I talked about of the shambling individual, like the storyteller leading into that scene said, hey, I'm putting this out here.
This one could be rough. Here's the X card if you need it. Now here's the scene.
Yeah, I'm going to start this off very slowly.
Yeah.
And it was clear that he had the sensation that this could get very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And it was good that he did that he prefaced it so that it wasn't like somebody was just sitting there taking the trauma in and not being able to accept it. I put that off to the same point of sitting with a group, when you're in your teens or even early 20s or even possibly later, where they're like, hey, we're going to watch this movie, and it gets to a thing that you're uncomfortable with in the movie, and you're sitting there amongst people who are enjoying it, and you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah.
You didn't know that was coming up.
Oh, yeah.
How do you manage that? Like, and it taints the rest of your feelings about that moment and those people around you and the movie.
We recently watched The Menu.
Oh, God.
Which was a really good movie, first off.
It's powerful.
But I have a pretty sizable suicide trigger for what should be obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And there is a scene in the movie where someone does that.
Yeah.
And very suddenly and violently. And you kind of, like, it gets telegraphed.
Yeah.
And you can feel it coming, and you're like, oh God, oh God, oh God. But, like, so for me, watching, like, The Menu was a horror movie.
Yeah.
It felt like Saw if it were produced by the Food Network, you know? But, like, I started reading reviews of it online, because this is the first I kind of had actually heard of the movie, was a few days prior to this. And so it kind of came out of left field, and you have a lot of fanfare for it. So I kind of want to see how other people perceived the movie.
Sure.
And everybody was like, "Oh yeah, it's a black comedy. We were laughing all the way through it." And I'm like,
"No.
Oh, I experienced that entirely different."
Yeah.
Oh, I was sick to my stomach halfway. I mean, it was a good movie. Don't get me wrong. Please understand that I hold the movie in the highest regard, and it is my personal trigger that made me not enjoy that scene a lot. But damn, you know?
I mean, I will flat out say it. We have a dear friend who has a daughter, an only child, and there are movies that man will not watch.
Oh, yeah.
Not because he's worried about his daughter getting injured or anything like that, but the fact of her he knows she's going to leave the nest at some point. And that really, really gets to him.
Yeah.
That is a real feeling. That is a traumatic moment in his mind.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. So being able to present that something's going to happen, you can't know everybody's trigger. You can't know everything. And that's why the X card is out there. Especially for adult themes, especially for things of like this, so that when you see discomfort, it is an obligation to everyone at the table to be willing to flip that card and look at somebody and saying, "Hey, are you okay?"
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So to answer the question, yes, communicate. Yeah. Yes, be prepared to watch your group. Do more than cringe.
Solicit feedback early and often means when you have the idea about it, when you're going to field it on the table, during the scene. It's okay. It's okay to just stop for a second, just stop for a beat in the middle of the scene and be like, "Everybody cool?
Yeah.
Do we need an X card, or can we proceed? You know.
Are we good to just take it as a pause?"
Yeah.
I mean, Nordic LARP basically has two positions for their stuff. They don't just have like a stop.
Right.
Like they have a pause and a stop.
Yeah.
And you can call either one of those. Like when it's a pause, everyone just takes a breath. They check in with what's going on. There might need to be a monologue or maybe even like a veil that happens instead. But if it's a stop, everyone agrees that the scene changes.
Yeah.
Nobody asks questions. It doesn't matter who called it. The scene changes. That's it. And to come back to that, like, well, we don't need the X card. We're all adults here. Well, Nordic LARPs do this all the time. They deal with traumatic situations. I'd like to point out the fact that most Nordic LARPs that do that kind of thing also have a required workshop time period prior to the game even running that is often as long, if not longer, than the game to prepare everyone for it.
Yeah.
Where they practice the X card. They practice stops. They practice and move through all the mechanics of the intimate challenges that occur so that when you get to the game situation, it becomes second nature for everyone to just accept these things as canon law.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hell, even Thirsty Sword Lesbians, or we're actually talking about that next week as our system spotlight, not only promotes the use of the X card, but actually gamifies it in a way. They actually want you to throw them out like potato chips. At the end of each session, all PCs gain XP if someone used a safety tool during the session.
Yeah.
as Marlo Singer from Fight Club says, I consider this asshole tax.
Yes. But the point of it is to make it comfortable.
Yeah, make it comfortable. Make it so common. Because the big problem with the X card, and this is why I said, like, immediately validate the person who flipped the X card. This is why I said that. Because there is a thing when someone is having a trauma response, and I know this because everyone's therapist will tell you this, is one of your first impulses is going to be, am I traumatized enough? Yeah. Is it that big of a deal? Everyone around me seems to be having fun, so maybe I can just swallow this one and not flip the X card, because I don't want my trauma to ruin everyone else's fun.
Yes.
And so you just eat it. You just soak it, and you never touch the X card. So Thirsty Sword Lesbians is like, no, throw it.
Throw it.
Everyone should throw it at least once, you know?
Yep.
Just X card. You want a bathroom break? Throw the X card.
Yeah.
It should be that common.
Yes.
So that nobody feels weird about reaching out and grabbing it.
Yeah. And to kind of circle back to the acceptance of that and the idea of consent being all across role-playing. I was reading a more recent thread about a vampire LARP where one of the characters happened to basically have a power that allowed them to trigger everyone's vice to run rampant. And there were players at that game who were like, my vice is like full-on, like, sexual assault.
Right.
Like, it's terrifyingly bad. Like, I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I will not roleplay that. And his commentary was, was the question of, like, well, should people just have to deal with this, or, because of what vampire is? In a previous post back in the 2000s, there was a lot of responses just like, well, yeah, just get over yourself. You knew what you were getting into. Now the responses were, players' boundaries are absolutely trump. It doesn't matter what the story is.
Yep.
Anything.
Forcing people into sexual situations, or anything of the sort is wrong and criminal. If a player doesn't want to explore sexual themes, drop it.
Yeah.
If sex is absolutely critical to your game, be upfront about expectations before the game even starts, so that player can give their informed consent. Anything less is terrible.
Yeah, I loved this line. A human being's personal boundaries are not an intrusion into your gaming.
Yep.
Like, if you can understand that and accept that, you're doing it right. If you think someone's boundaries is intruding on your fun, change your heart, figure out your existence. You don't belong at the table.
Yes.
You don't belong at that table.
Absolutely. If you think of it this way, if you can look at another human being who is just in earnest told you, the thing you're doing is hurting me and I am suffering, it is not your place to ask why. It is not your place to be like, well, you're not suffering that bad. Or if someone tells you they are suffering, your only place as a human being is to show them compassion. And if you have a say in whether or not they are suffering, you stop what you are doing. You stop your involvement in it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
That's all the X card is, hey, this part isn't fun for me. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
How can we change it to make it fun for you again? Yeah. Do you need a moment?
Right.
I'm sorry you suffered, my friend.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all that's required of you as a human.
Yep.
So
I'm going to circle us back to the very beginning of this whole thing of why we do this.
Yeah.
We do it for enjoyment. And one person's enjoyment should not come at the cost of someone else having an awful experience.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
There's your adult themes in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
And how to handle it.
Yeah. But if everybody consents to them and everybody can have a good time for them, they can make some really great moments at the table.
Yes.
All right. We've got one question left because we only had Nevum and one question from Vedran.
Yeah, people were uncomfortable with asking questions. Clearly,
we're so sorry.
And that's
about
okay.
your
We're
suffering.
so sorry. We didn't mean to.
So Vedran asks, where do you normally draw your personal lines on these kinds of subjects? For example, I've had players romance NPCs. Always handled it with a fade to black for any racy content. I did, however, have the possibility for consequences. One player married an NPC and played their child in another campaign. Another was surprised to find that a fling had produced offspring and was struggling to decide what to do about it. So maybe you want to know what our personal lines are? Okay, so personally, in my games, I like PG-13 romance.
Mm-hmm.
I like on-screen kisses. Anything further, we fade to black.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get in-depth describing anything. I will describe the general feel of a kiss in that it is tender or urgent or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about as far as I'll ever go
mm-hmm.
with describing a sexual act. I dislike torture. I'll be honest, I almost X-carded you breaking that guy's fingers.
That's fair.
I was this close to doing it.
That's fine.
But then Rhaegar stepped in and was like, hey, buddy, you're crossing a line. And I went, okay, this turned into an inter-character moment and not an interrogation.
Yep.
I'm going to let that go.
Yep.
But it may also be a small part of why I brought that character back to chastise you for it.
No reason why not to.
Other than that, though, I think, torture is, I think, probably my big one. So we have combat in a lot of games. It's a system that a lot of role-playing systems focus on, and sometimes players get overzealous about wanting to make their opponents pay for whatever the crime they are that they have done, and sometimes that can get into some real Hannibal territory.
Yeah.
And I greatly dislike that. So any game that I have, I'm going to put the kibosh on that. But other than that, that's oh, and absolutely no sexual assault. No, doesn't even exist in my world. Mm-mm. It's not a thing you can do, and it's not a thing any of my villains will ever do.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
I push the innuendo and romance a little further, but I do that based upon what the character has designed. Mm-hmm. Like in the case of my 7th Sea game, Chris had a very romantic character written up.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of his stuff was romance related. So, and he was gorgeous. Like he had the traits for that kind of stuff. And so people swooned over him.
Mm-hmm.
And he leaned into it, and I would fade to black moments, but it was clear that he was the lover.
Yeah, sure.
And that was I let those kind of moments happen. I also pushed it in my D&D game with our half-orc because again, he was this very rugged, paladinic, knightly person, and a woman swooned over him and was fawning over him. And it wasn't until a certain point where he was just like, he, as the character, became uncomfortable, and I could see that without asking for it, the player was uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and so I just immediately pulled the veil on that.
Yep.
And just pulled it back. It was clear that enough had been laid out. I could now just use the reactions of things that were left, mints on things, scents of perfume lightly on other things, where it's like the romance is still happening there, the idea of flirtation, but it's no longer overt.
Right.
It is now the consequences of it that can stick around. And I think that within its own framework still works.
Mm-hmm.
And it was much more comfortable in that sense. So there's a dance that happens there, but for me personally, I can get lost in creative moments. I truly can. But there are certain things that I cannot handle. I like with you, rape does not happen.
Yep.
If it does, it happens off screen, and it is a horrific outcome.
Yes.
For of what has occurred. It is beyond evil. An act, and everyone agrees. Even villainy would agree.
Right.
Like I dare say that if it was something that a player were to fictionally add into a story, I would nearly have do the situation where the villain sends the heart of the person who did it back to them saying, I apologize that one of my crew had done this. It has been dealt with. If you need more recompense than this, please let me know at your earliest convenience, and we shall handle it.
Yep.
Things like that, so that it's clear that that is unacceptable.
Yep.
So that it doesn't have to come around.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like, grief and loss and, requinted love, some of those sit, but at a weird place for me that I'm comfortable with. I think bullying is one that I have a very hard time with, but it is not something that is often pushed around. You pushed the edge of that in this last story with the one character, but I was able to change my mind how I was seeing it. That it wasn't so much bullying. Because there was nothing else that was involved. It was one individual. It wasn't like this person is the I use the word pariah, but that's not right.
Pariah is a black sheep, the ugly duckling of the clan, basically.
But there was nothing else surrounding and using it as a popular push.
Yeah.
So I was able to step away from it. But I honestly, to God, I cannot watch shows and old, like, 80s and 90s movies where, like, the runt's being beaten up and thrown around, or worse yet, they don't know it.
Right.
And it's going to happen to them. You can see, it's going to happen. I cannot take that tension.
Oof.
I just can't.
Yeah.
Too many personal triggers.
Right on.
Too many personal triggers. So that's where my lines kind of sit. And in all honesty, even just talking about it here, they're not things that we've discussed as game master to player or player to game master. Like, those aren't things that have come up often.
Yeah.
We've learned them out of each other, but it's hard to talk about these lines because you don't think about them.
Yeah, I don't know that I would ever think to consult you guys about bullying.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I see things, from my perspective, of course, because I wrote the NPCs and I wrote the plot line.
But
them bullying that mage, like, okay, yeah, they were mistreating him, and yeah, he is the absolute, ugly duckling whipping bitch of the of the House Telvanni. But, like, I don't know that they see what they're doing to him as. No, Vedran, or not Vedran, Nolanir was bullying him.
100%.
The Archmage was bullying
100%.
him. His own house was just doing what they do politics-wise.
Which is how I saw it.
Yeah.
But Nolanir was a bully in that, but it wasn't the same kind of static. It wasn't the commissioned, I'm going to get everyone else behind me, and I'm going to make him feel lesser.
Right.
With everyone else's consent as well. And that's, I think, true bullying.
Yeah.
One is just being a jerk.
He was an absolute jerk, and the thing that I liked about that plot line is that, so he bullies the other mage because he believes that since that mage comes from a certain culture, he's going to do bad things.
Right.
And became a self-fulfilling prophecy that because he bullied him, the man lashed out and did the exact bad things that he thought he was going to do.
Yep.
In the first place.
Yep. Exactly.
So,
you got the result. And to say the least, his house propagates their own self-fulfilling prophecy.
Sure.
100%. That was clear.
Sure.
So
absolutely, you saw firsthand the culture he came from.
Yeah. So to kind of I'm sorry, someone was trying to call me. So to kind of answer your question, Vedran, in regards to this, it's not necessarily harsh or racy content.
Yeah.
There is a lot of other kinds of content. I know players at my game who just from knowing them, there are definite topics that I cannot cross.
Mm-hmm.
Nor can I set in motion situations, for instance, like I know one of the players at the table, I can't isolate them socially.
Mm-hmm.
If people leave them, that's a trigger.
Yeah.
But I only know that because I know that person intimately.
Yep.
I've known them for 20 years. I know that about them. Mm-hmm.
He mentions pregnancy a lot in his question too.
Yeah.
And I say that's a trigger for me.
Yeah.
Actually,
I will not do that to you.
I mean, I don't mind that someone is pregnant, but I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to. I don't. The more details you give me about that person being pregnant and what they're dealing with and how they're going through and how far along they Can't do it.
Nope.
Don't want to hear any bit of that.
Nope.
Yep.
Nope. Which is why when I handled the family thing with you, child wasn't even yours.
Yep, child wasn't even mine.
Nope.
That's fine. She's already born, already grown.
But still attached. So got all those pieces to it.
Yeah.
So we hope that this episode gives you a little bit of insight on adult themes and gets you, I will say, warmed up for the month and where we're going with this. Because next week we're hitting
Thirsty Sword Lesbians.
Yes.
Defined as a joyous, fun, and disastrously romantic.
I love that.
Thirsty Sword Lesbians from Evil Hat Games is our system spotlight for this very red month. Keeping up with the theme of February, Sarah and Rob will grab their weapons, don their gayest apparel, and step into this Powered by the Apocalypse system about celebrating queerness, which I am 100% here for.
Yeah, I'm actually excited because there's so many wonderful things that are in this book that are going to be a lot of fun to mess around with and play and discuss with you guys. So be prepared with your joyous questions. I'm sure we're going to get a few at least. So.
Alrighty. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us on our Discord. You can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially our name members who support us every single month. Knox in the Box, Subjet, the Arcane Asylum, Veteran, Huluvu, Sam, Sean, and Sparkle Motion. We appreciate all your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find them on Instagram or on YouTube at Arcane Anthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find them at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on YouTube Music. And our outro music, which is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Mid-Air Machine, you can find them at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out, as always, to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over these years, give these great stories to share with you and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you guys so much.
Love you guys.
Good night.